Thank you, everyone, for coming on the start of a major holiday weekend. We have I think, an excellent presentation here today that I think the towns should be very interested in. I think before we go too much further, though, I think perhaps... Right. Chair will entertain a motion to approve minutes of previous meeting. Evelyn, Jane, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Okay, now we can move on. Paul, why don't I just turn the meeting over to you?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome everyone. We are very fortunate today to have with us a gentleman by the name of Sean Carroll. He's the purchasing agent for Onondaga County. And Julie, as the story goes, just to give you a little backstory, Julie had been exploring the possibility of what type of efficiencies and savings the county could get by somehow coming together with the municipalities in Warren County and therefore generate savings for our taxpayers, as well as being in compliance or having a plan to submit to the state for our efficiency plans that you all know that we have to submit by June 1st. And it was really kind of remarkable because as this got going, we found out that Onondaga County really has a very significant and involved purchasing program where it involves a number of its municipalities and school districts, and it was really actually quite impressive. And Sean's going to outline for us, I think today, how they got there and what their experiences have been and exactly what they're doing and what kind of savings they're looking at. Now, the program that they have, too, I just want to emphasize at this point is, this is the entire thing. I mean, they've got the entire purchasing consolidated. Warren County, we're not suggesting that we would jump right in and just consolidate everything and take everything away from the towns or anything like that, or anybody else. What we're looking at is doing it in phases, and Julie will outline to you what the phases are. And we're also looking to build a comfort level with the municipalities in Warren County, the town supervisors, districts, everybody, that they're comfortable with what we're doing, the pace at what we're doing it, and how the towns are involved. And the beauty of it is, and I think you'll see it from Sean's presentation, is that we don't have to, it's not an all or nothing thing. So the towns will have some options as to how you want to become involved, or if you want to become involved at all. One of the things I would say, though, that in the efficiency plans, I was talking to Supervisor Wood here just before the meeting got started, and one of the reasons I'm kind of excited about the purchasing plan, though, is that if a town is not able to achieve a 1% savings on its own, by coming together with the county and by joining in on the purchasing initiative, it provides us with a hook, if you will, to get the county, or get the municipality into the county's plan, so that even if the municipality is not saving the full 1%, if the county as a whole, with all of its plans that it has, and we'll talk about this a little bit later after the presentations about some other ideas on how we can get there, but if the county as a whole, with all the municipalities that are submitting with the county, achieve the 1% savings, then you're in, you're covered. So I think that this is, as it's turning out, between this and perhaps animal control, will be the most likely areas where we might be able to put together some plans that will generate the type of savings that we need to, put everybody on track for the rebate checks, et cetera, going back to the taxpayers. But as I got to stress again, what's really exciting to me, though, is that we're also looking at this beyond just what we got to do to meet the state's obligations. We're looking at what can we do with this program ultimately that will be extremely beneficial to the towns and helpful to you as town supervisors. So without any further ado, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Mr. Sean Carroll from Onondaga County and turn it over to him.
Thank you, Paul. Welcome, Sean. Thank you. We're all yours.
I am already nervous that I have oversold my program to you. Thank you very much for inviting us today. We are very proud of our program and hoping to share some of the things we've learned along the way. So this is not just a, hey, look at what we did great, but we do have some advice if you're open to that, that we'd like to share. If it's okay with everybody, first off, my name's Sean Carroll. I'm the County Purchasing Director from Onondaga County. Under our program, we are also the purchasing office for the City of Syracuse, the Syracuse City School District, several dozen towns and villages in our community, and also almost half of the fire departments. We are not currently serving independent school districts, but only because it wasn't part of the original plan that our legislature laid out. They have expressed interest, but we haven't gotten there yet. I have brought my deputy, Andy Trombley, with me today. He is actually doing a lot of the day-to-day operational stuff on these programs while I perform in front of legislators and speak about the program. So I appreciate his help today. And I would just want to thank you guys all for inviting us. Before I walk through some items, I just want to give you some history on our program. In 2011, I had been the purchasing director for 5 days, and I went to our budget presentation, and our county executive announced that she had sent a letter to all the towns, all the villages, and all the municipalities, and that if they wanted to get out of the purchasing business, they could. They should just call me. That's when I found out about it, so I went stark white, and then we just tried to figure out how to do it from there. So a lot of what we've been doing has been trial and error, and there certainly have been some errors along the way. Ultimately, the goal was to look at our taxpayers as not as village taxpayers or town taxpayers or county taxpayers, but as taxpayers. So to some extent, our program is based on it being a shared balance sheet, and it's based on the fact that ultimately it is the residents and the people who pay those bills that are the most significant people to serve in the process. So you'll see that come out. There are some other models, and we'll certainly share those with you also. That gives you some context about our program and how we've been operating so far. The biggest problem we wanted to solve is our villages were paying 50 cents for pencils, and this is by example, not a specific number, but our villages were paying 35 cents. The county was paying 25 cents, and when we did this together, we all paid 20. So our volume helped drive everybody else's pricing down. So the savings at different levels of government is different. But obviously the county spend is higher than some of the towns and villages. So our savings aggregated at a different rate also. So that was basically the thought process we went into it with. And the other most important thing we went into that were direct instructions from the county executive is do not impact the autonomy of any organization. Go in and offer them whatever services they want. Don't tell them no, and if they want one service or help with one commodity, give it to them. And if they want to completely get out of the business of procurement, give it to them. So those were the approaches we took. So Andy, if you wouldn't mind. First of all, let's talk about the terrible big C word I have up there. To be clear, I have an intermunicipal agreement with multiple organizations, the city and the school district specifically, where they don't have a purchasing department anymore. That's why we call our program a consolidation. There are a number of towns and villages that are participating as a shared service, not as a consolidation. So please don't be afraid of the giant boogeyman word of consolidation. I know sometimes the natural reaction to that. That's why we call our program that, but it's certainly, we're able to talk about it as a shared services program also. These are the things that we've found have produced hard savings or other soft benefits, okay? Volume savings is the number one target for this program. So we do owe you a report from us about some of our specific volume savings, percentages on commodities. We have been asked for that, and we will provide that over the next week or so. But to give you a high level, we have some commodities where we saved 10% on the commodity purchase. We have some commodities where we saved 5%. So on our salt purchase, because the salt mine only had to administer one contract, we saved 10%. I can't promise you you're going to, but our numbers are on. We've always had a contract that is a little bit advantageous against the state contract. So on $40 a ton, we brought the price down $4 a ton, 200,000 tons. We were very fortunate out of the gate to have something like that to rely on. Our office supplies is down 4% against where we started in 2011. Because of the way we wrote the bid, we have more than 100 municipalities buying off of it, and that is driving the price down. So I tell everybody this, I'm not an altruist. This is good for the county. It's driving my price down on $700,000 in office supplies a year. But it's also driving everybody else's price down. So in some cases it's 8 or 9% on the case of paper at the town or village level, but it was only 1% for us. So we're breaking all of those numbers down. We're going to be prepared to share those. There are a couple of places where, because of some of our laws, the City of Syracuse has some different policies in place that on occasion on some things drive prices up. They have a living wage ordinance. They have some of those other things. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about is you actually have to understand what rules each of you are following, how close they are together, because there are some things that will be cost drivers down the road. It may not be a prime location for you to start this program. But so volume savings is the most important, and I think, Julie, that's what you're probably going to focus on out of the gate. Centralized purchasing intelligence. The purchasing law at the state level has changed 9 times in the last 4 years. Big changes, piggybacking, best value, those sorts of things, the ability to include local authorities. Having 35 or 40 separate organizations that all need to relearn those rules every time they change is a real cost. And if you're having your functional folks do that, it's taking them away from, I like to say firemen should put fires out, not know how to buy fire hose. So there's an aspect of expertise that gets produced. Reduced administrative overhead. Purchase orders cost money. Public bids cost money. They cost money to advertise. They cost staff time to create, to evaluate. If all you accomplished was you took 10 bids for the same item or 10 purchase orders for the same item and turned it into one administrative function, that would be paying dividends. Reduced participation costs for vendors. It is very expensive for vendors to prepare purchase orders, bid responses, that sort of thing. The other issue, and the next bullet item actually goes with that. It used to be that if you went to the Onondaga County and you didn't get our work, you could still compete for the Village of Skaneateles work or for the Town of Cicero work. Now, you get one shot. If you don't do it, you're just not in the game for 2 years. So the pencils are very, very sharp because they want to be very competitive. That is actually not something we anticipated, but it is something we're hearing from the vendors back. So, reduced number of solicitations also rolls up into the reduced administrative overhead. Increased cost avoidance. In my world, the worst possible case scenario is an Article 78, a challenge to the integrity of our bid specifications. Those challenges can be very, very expensive, and if the process isn't done properly, very costly. They can delay projects. There are obviously penalties that could go along with that. Centralizing that intelligence, making sure the rules are all being done the same way, making sure we can stand behind the process has been an advantage that we've been able to provide. Since our program, we have had an Article 78 filed against us from one of the town and village bids that we did, and it was dismissed out of hand because the process was intact. A year before that, a town had the same Article 78 brought against it, and they lost, just because there were different terms and conditions in the bid. So we consider that a big success, although I have no idea how to count it in my savings model. Decreased reliance on consultants. This may or may not apply to you. We had a town that paid an engineer to design their bid specifications even when they didn't need an engineering stamp. Sometimes you find that, you designed the bid for our roof. Great. So would you design the bid for our garbage pickup? One of our towns paid $10,000 the last time this was done to an engineer to design the bid specs. We did it in 12 days for free. Those are the kinds of things that we are counting in hard savings. decreased and standardized risk exposure. So that goes back to making sure that your clauses are all intact, and also back to the centralized purchasing intelligence to make sure the new rules constantly get incorporated. You know, if every municipality right now is having to keep track of the Iranian Divestment Act and the do you happen to own property in Northern Ireland exclusion under the state contract rules, if all of you are double checking the disbarment list for the state each time, there's a lot of that administrative work that you may not even realize is going on because you're just doing it, but it is actually taking a huge amount of functional time. So these are the things that we've been learning along the way. Would you mind, Andy? Political will, this is always a delicate conversation. I'm not originally from the public sector. I've spent most of my career in the private sector so far, and what I find is that sometimes it is possible to outweight change in the government. Sometimes it is possible as leadership changes and that sort of thing. It's easy to resist from the middle. So it really does require a commitment from any of the participating municipalities, whether it's just on one commodity or whether it's on an across-the-board relationship. The closer the relationship is, the stronger the commitment really needs to be from each of the participating municipalities. So the other thing is, did all of you know you had purchasing officers? Nobody has ever put me in a St. Patrick's Day parade. Nobody cares who their purchasing director is. I'm sorry, Julie, but nobody does. It's just, this is not, we're not talking about shared services for a police force or a fire department or something like that, where there's an emotional attachment to the patch or to seeing your town or village have that. Your residents don't know you have a purchasing director. So, it's certainly an opportunity where you can deal with back of the house consolidation or back of the house shared services without there being, protests in the street, and there's usually not a lot of ire from the community on that. Top-down support from consolidation, this is not a program that can be done from the middle. It's not a program that your, highway superintendents are going to do unless they're going to have the support from the towns. Unless they're going to have, the department heads are probably not going to do this unless it is a top-down recommendation. Realistic expectations, if you believe that this is going to solve all of your financial problems or it's going to fix your whole 1% in the first 30 days, that is just not true. Realistic expectations are that it has taken us almost 3 years to be really at a place where we're excited about this and we're out talking about it. If you had asked me to do this presentation in the early 2013, I would have gone, I'm not actually sure that I can claim victory here yet. So it's really important that this not be seen as a silver bullet, but as a long-term sustainability plan for your organizations. Balancing planning and seizing an idea whose time has come. For 22 or 23 years in a row, this program did not get support in my county. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time when we had decided, to no credit of my own, that it was finally time to do this. But it is possible to plan yourself out of this. If you try to look at every possible scenario and try to look at every possible different permutation of the numbers and different permutations of the sales, you will definitely be able to plan yourself out of doing this. So you need a plan. Don't do what I did, which is to have all 3 legislative bodies pass a full-blown consolidation with 30 days notice. Don't do that. That is my first, what I would not have done if I could do it over. But by the same token, don't plan it to a point where planning becomes the end goal. So that's just, and again, that's just from our experience, but we thought that was important to bring out. And then your elected officials are hopefully very secure in their jobs and very good at them and are going to be with us for a very long time. However, you want to get into an arrangement that makes this not about who is town supervisor or not about who's the chair or any of those things right now, because you have to give this time to work. So if you're on a 2-year election cycle, you really want to try a preliminary exercise that spans that. Okay. The other issue is depersonalizing. This has worked out really well for us. If I come to you and tell you, I promise you I'm going to do this and I'm going to get it done, and luckily I have Andy now, because if I promised you it, I could remember that a week and a half from now, but Andy is more likely to actually get that done in the next day or two. It completely depersonalizes it. When you have a disagreement over who makes a decision, the IMA already says that. So it's not a matter of arguing back and forth with each other. Choosing a model. Our model is a shared balance sheet model. That means that the county has extended to all the towns and villages these services for free, because I'm paying for the program through my discounts. That is not a model that's necessarily going to, I haven't looked at your volumes, so it's not necessarily a model that's going to work here, and it's certainly not a policy decision we're going to weigh in on either way. We wanted to give you some other choices. The BOCES model, some of you may be familiar with how BOCES works, but they have a purchasing office that does some consolidated purchasing, and all of the member school districts pay a fee to support that purchasing function and to drive those contracts. The piggybacking model is great for the piggybacker and less good for the piggybackee. So if I put a contract out for guardrail on the highways, if I don't have all the town and village volume in there, I'm not getting the benefit of the increased volume savings. But if I have piggybacking language and the towns and villages can do that, they're still able to skip the competitive process and just buy off the contract. So it's sort of a one-way benefit program, which does not mean that it's a bad model, and we certainly do it on all of our commodities, but it's not a model that pays dividends to everybody. The complete outsourced model is what the city of Syracuse does with us. They had 7 employees. They kept 2, but moved them to another function. 2 of them retired, and 3 of them came over to our office. We completely integrated their technology, or we are in the process of finishing that. I don't want to oversell it. The closer you can get to being on the same platform and speaking the same language and using the same vocabulary, the better this is going to be. But we just absorbed all of their procurement. So we went from $60 million in 2011 to just over $300 million managed in 2014. Assigning the costs and responsibilities, again, who will bear the cost? That's about picking a model. Who will be in charge? This is more than just I'm in charge and you're going to do what I tell you to do. This is really about whose counsel is going to interpret the law when there's a question, who is going to be empowered to disqualify bidders, according to the state law, those sorts of things. Who's going to be responsible for FOILs, for standing up, if Article 78's, responses to audit compliance, those sorts of things. These are things that all cost money. But there's also a responsibility for them. To give you an example, there's a requirement that bidders who are disqualified get a protest period. If you give them the protest period and they don't use it, they can never file an Article 78. So there are tools you can build into the bidding specifications to protect yourself, but you really want to talk about how many people you want to be maintaining documents, how many of these duplications of services you want to be doing. I get talking about FOIL is not necessarily sexy when it comes to shared services and those sorts of things, but 30 people touching it versus 1 person touching it and the documents being managed the same way, there are efficiencies there. Liability issues, what happens if a vendor challenge is successful? That's going to happen occasionally. Certainly in an organization our size, you have to have some conversation about if the procurement people who are charged with doing this discharge their roles correctly, there's probably some indemnification that has to happen. But it really is on the purchasing officers that are doing the work. So, would you mind, Andy? Might have it here. There we go. Identifying the rules. So you're all subject to the federal rules when you're accepting federal money and the state rules. All of you probably have a local purchasing policy. All of it is probably a little different. Some of you may have passed the rule changes that have happened in the last 3 or 4 years. Some of you may not have. If someone like Julie or depending on the model you pick is going to take responsibility for those things, she's got to understand those rules. And where you're not married to those particular rules, you want to sync those rules up as much as you can. You want to be following, to the greatest extent possible, the same set of rules all the way through. Field specific, don't forget that there are field specific and rule specific to funding. I don't believe there's any school districts in here, but E-rate funding from the federal government or federal highway money comes with different rules about disadvantaged business enterprises, those sorts of things. So there's a lot to know about the rules, which goes back to having all of the purchasing intelligence in one place. Who interprets the rules? That goes back to the model you're using. What happens when councils disagree? The town council and county council disagree on an interpretation of general municipal law. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, that's something you want to sort of lay out and address. If you're just using the piggybacking model, it's usually whoever put the contract out that governs that. But if you're using a more consolidated, a more complete shared service version, you definitely want to hammer some of those things out. Comparing the cultures, to give you an example, we're helping Otsego County get a handle on some of their purchasing also. My purchasing office is completely centralized. My office is the only office that is allowed to make purchases for more than $200. Some of the departments have purchase cards in the field. Otsego County is completely decentralized. So each of their department heads are responsible individually for maintaining their purchasing policies. There are definitely some, you're going to find when you go to do this, the closer shared service relationship you try to have, you're going to have different purchasing cultures in each organization, and you need to ask those questions up front. Would you mind? Operational integration. Again, your technology is really important. If all of you are using different electronic systems to manage or paper systems for that matter, to manage your procurement, you're going to have challenges gaining efficiencies. Because if you just recreate that process, you need the same number of people, touch the same number of sheets of paper, the same number of times. So there's got to be some consideration of where you're going to get those efficiencies. Human bandwidth, there really is just a physicality to processing bids and processing POs. So one of the errors we made up front is we tried to jump a chasm in 2 leaps. That's the way I describe it, and that's how you fall down the hole. We tried to half-staff it and see how it went. And that's challenging because if you half-staff it, you can never prove it works because you're always behind the 8 ball. So you have to take a real look at what the volume is going to be and what the new volume is going to be if you're going from 12 purchase orders down to 1. Approvals, everybody's got a different workflow. Each organization probably has a financials workflow and an approval process. So you really need to understand what the commitment is there. And then financial commitments, I don't know if everybody here is required to encumber all of your funds before you expend them. But if not, somebody still has to make sure the money is there and that it's been budgeted and that the purchase is correct budgetarily. It's not really a procurement function, so each individual organization in our model does that for themselves still. Do customers have reasonable expectations? You want to make sure people know if they have emergencies, you're going to take care of them, but this is going to take some work. So it may be a little slower of a process at the beginning. The first time you do the stuff together, it will get better, but you want to make sure you manage expectations. You want to know who can declare an emergency at 3 o'clock in the morning when a pipe breaks. Does everybody have to call Julie at 3 o'clock in the morning, or do you have that ability on your own? Preferred vendors. So this is something we're wrestling with Otsego County. It's an entirely different market for us. So we need to get a handle on who the vendors are that they've been dealing with. There's no reason to use an Onondaga County print house for their envelopes. But I have to meet those vendors, and we have to get them sort of engaged in our process with our buyers. Process mapping. Workflow is really important. My guess is if you have procurement people who have been doing this for a very long time, they just do it on autopilot. They don't actually know they're doing it, and they're not actually sure what all of the steps are. We've found that we have had to reverse engineer the process really to get our hands on it. Your policy probably lays it out, but people just get used to doing it. And then streamlining, there may be opportunities in the workflow where you can combine steps and those sorts of things. Communication is a huge deal. If you can provide a service, tell people you can. If you can't provide it, also tell them that. Bad news is news first. That is actually how you build trust. We missed on that mark a couple of times. We worked on the logistics of it and not on the managing this is the wrong word, but the emotional content of doing something differently. So in some cases we managed the logistics and we didn't manage change with the people. And that's a huge thing that I would encourage you to do. Counting success. This is how we do it, and again, we're going to share some of that information over the next week and a half or so. Hard cost savings from personnel reductions. We didn't go to any municipality and go, I'm going to have to get rid of 3. What we said was, is anybody getting ready to retire? Is anybody leaving anyway? Do you have some empty titles that you don't want to fill? Can we combine those? And then some of the people that we absorbed into our organization were ready to retire within a year or 2, so they gave us some flexibility in how we staff those. We're not advocating that either way. That's a decision for your organizations to make, not for ours. Hard cost administrative savings, reduce general overhead. It's as simple as, I don't know what your newspaper charges, but public bids cost money to advertise. So if you advertise 1 public bid combined instead of 22, you saved that dollar amount 21 times. So there are real dollars to be counted there. Volume savings on commodities is perhaps the thing everybody is going to be looking at to judge the success of this program. My recommendation there, and I have shared this with Paul and with Julie, is get a baseline. So if you're going to do this process, come to the table with what you pay now. So there is a way for you to keep track of it. This was a major place where we fell down. We did not have all of the current spend for some of our customers, so we have been unable to fully capture the savings of our program. Some benefits of the program, harder to enumerate. Cost avoidance. You know, how do you justify cost avoidance? You know you avoided costs, you know you reduced risk, you know you did it correctly, but there's no way to know what it would have cost you if you had been challenged or you had been audited or you had been any of those other things. So I am consistently writing a paragraph about how excited we are about this and not putting a number on it. These are qualifiable standards. Increased customer experience. At first, all of your users will feel like this is a little more challenging. That's just natural with any change. But if you can increase the experience and make it easier for them to get their products at the end of the day, those are benefits. Risk avoidance, sort of the same as cost avoidance. The hidden costs of procurement. If you are a DOT person and you are supposed to be out, managing a crew who's paving the roads, and you're trying to find out how to buy tires, that crew may or may not be being managed correctly. So how do you count the value of having a manager focus on their expertise? I have no idea how to count it. I know it's there. I know we're hearing people talk about it as a benefit we've provided, but I don't know how to count it. My deputy county executive has told me he plans to give me a book on how to count anything. So if I figure out how to count any of these things, I'll be happy to share those. Increased functional productivity, that sort of goes along with eliminating the hidden costs. So that basically walks you through our process. So the commitment we've made is, if we did it wrong, we will tell you. We promise. Actually, we'll tell you that probably more ardently than we will tell you what we did correctly, because we think that's probably more valuable. We're not here to help you make policy decisions. We're happy to share our experience and what went well and what didn't. But it's certainly not an Onondaga County says that this is the right way to do it, so do it this way, otherwise it's not going to work. Your model has to work for you. We have committed to back your organization up and to back Julie up with anything she needs. I did bring business cards if anybody has any interest. Our preference is certainly that this communication is a Warren County communication, and that our preference would be to support Paul and to support Julie and to have those questions and those conversations going on with them. But certainly we'll provide you contact information if anybody has any interest. Other than that, that was pretty much what we came prepared to share. I don't know if you want us to stick around after the meeting for questions, or did you want to do questions now?
I think I'd like to, if it would be all right. First of all, let me thank you, gentlemen, for being here on a holiday weekend and traveling this distance
Sure.
to share this information with us.
This is our new favorite subject. We are happy to talk about it.
Well, please extend our appreciation also to the county executive and the I think it's really incredible what you've accomplished in what I think is a relatively short period of time in Onondaga County with some very major municipalities, not the least of which being, of course, the city.
Yeah.
And
we actually really appreciate that, because from a day-over-day basis, it's like working in a trauma unit. So to hear that, from an outside perspective, that's why we were so excited to come today. From an outside perspective, to hear that it is a program that makes sense other places is really exciting to us.
I particularly liked your example of jumping the chasm in one leap, not two. So
An Indiana Jones
we
reference.
all share that experience on occasion. But with that, I'd like to, as you've been quantifying, maybe I'll lead off. As you've been quantifying or better quantifying the savings or the reduced cost of purchasing, are you finding that you're continuing? That's continuing to go up?
Yes, which is a qualified yes. So let me give you some examples of some things that they're a little challenging. So Onondaga County put out a Medicare Part B RFP. We got an award. We were going to do that anyway, and it saved us a considerable amount of money. We had put the piggybacking language in it, and the city ended up saving $750,000 or $1 million on that same bid. I'm not counting that savings in consolidation because I'm counting it for the city because they didn't have to do the process, but I'm not counting it for us because we were going to do it anyway. So we're trying to be very conservative with how we count the numbers. I'm also having trouble because I didn't establish a baseline knowing the entire scope and depth of the program. I can tell you that when the state discontinued some of the truck bids, we put out a truck bid that seems to be very popular, and we did close to $30 million in trucks off of that bid last year for something like 65 municipalities, a number of whom were not in Onondaga County. So, yeah, if you're talking about direct savings, we're having some trouble counting it. We believe that the program is still being very successful. If you're talking about overall, is it working? Absolutely, it's working. And because we absorb the cost, we're gross at about 1.2 million, but I'm only net at about $600,000 in savings. But overall, I'm counting on the order of magnitude of about 5 million in 3 years to participating municipalities. I have no idea what I'm not counting. So we believe the program is still going, but I am having some struggles counting our success that way. The other thing is, you could shoot yourself in the foot. I have a municipality that passed a piece of legislation recently that the other municipalities won't agree to, and it is dividing some of that volume out. So I don't know the ramifications of that yet. So again, it goes back to communication, trust between the organizations. You become not independent actors. You have the ability to affect each other. So you have to be conscious of that.
Any questions?
I juggle, I tell jokes.
What?
No.
Yeah, Sean, you said your county absorbs the cost.
Yes.
Is that 100% accurate? You don't charge the town anything for this?
I don't. No.
Must
If
be.
a town or village is not in an intermunicipal agreement, I do charge them a 5% fee on their auction listings because I manage all of their online surplus sales auctions through our contract also. If they participate in the full-blown intermunicipal agreement process, we waive that, and that's the only fee we've ever passed through our legislative body. And again, because of our size and because of the size of the purchasing staff I already had, that was a model that we could handle. We make no comment about whether that is a viable option here or not. But I can't tell the story without sharing that part, so.
Are you finding that you're actually able to beat state bid contract, state bid prices in some instances? And if not in terms of the price, at least the timeliness of delivery?
That's a two-part question. Not always. It is worth putting our own bids out. Salt is the prime example right now. Even with the 2 winters back-to-back, the state contract price is about $1 and change more a ton than ours is. And our combined usage is just about 200,000 tons. So I would have been leaving an awful lot of money on the table. Yesterday I had a meeting with our water organizations. So we have 4 organizations managing the whole water system for our county and also for part of Oswego County. Their chemicals have not all been consolidated because one of them was a local authority. Until last year we didn't have the authority to provide services for them. We think we probably have about $75,000 left on the table for chemicals. And it's not all our low bids. Some of the other organizations have gotten lower prices than ours. So we're going to use their bids. We're going to reissue their bid with piggybacking language in it, and we're going to capture those savings that way. But it's also one less bid I have to do. It's cheaper for everybody, and it's just a better opportunity. So. Does that answer your question? You wanted to know the second part of the question. Does everybody know that the state didn't rebid glass spheres? The glass that goes in your reflective paint so that when you stripe your highways, it's not on there this year? The state is confused about the sort of discretionary spending some of our municipalities have. So when they don't renew a contract and it takes 7 months to get a new contract, it's very challenging for local municipalities. Where we understand the commodity, we are able to very quickly respond to that. Where I don't understand the commodity, I end up underwater for quite a while because I have to rewrite the entire specification. So that's challenging for us.
Jim?
Yeah, John, I'm Jim Brock. I'm from the city of Glens Falls.
Great. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. No, I'm a supervisor too, so.
Great.
A few years ago, we had someone come in and offer, when I was on the common council, offer to come in and look at our costs, our vendors, and look for ways to reduce costs. And the mayor decided that he didn't want to follow through on it because he felt it was a threat to some of the local vendors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, do you handle that in a sort of a political way, or is that left up to the city or whoever wants to handle that part?
I think the beauty of the process is that in some cases, because of the public bidding process and the quoting process, it eliminates some of that. The process eliminates some preference naturally,
Right.
but there are things you can do to very much drive your business locally. First off, because I'm doing primarily Onondaga County, most of my businesses are local, okay? Where it comes to the difference between the city and the county, we just combined the bidding lists. We let everybody bid for all of the work, and in some cases it's been great for businesses who are set up in the city, and in some cases it's been great for businesses who are set up in the county. But I do things like I don't advertise in the New York State Reporter. So the New York State Reporter is free, and you can advertise your bids in there, and it would save me about $2,000 a year. But I pay money to advertise in my local newspaper instead, because then I don't get nearly as many state bidders and state participants in the bid. The only challenge there is if you only have one person locally, you want to cast a bigger net, and you want to balance it because you need competition also. So there are strategies you can do to drive that. New York State is allowed to preference New York State local folks, and local municipalities are not. So what I usually do is include the vendor list and then we call them or we directly solicit them in order to continue to get them involved. But once I bring the horse to water, I can't make it drink.
Now, do you ever, if a town or city wants to bid some things on its own and then you do the rest, do you allow, or I mean?
Yeah. It is not my place or the county's place to tell local municipalities how to govern themselves.
Right.
If I can provide a service that will save you money and bring you efficiencies, I provide that service. If you can provide a service that will provide me an efficiency, please include piggybacking language so I can buy it.
Right.
I mean, we really, as much as it doesn't sound that way sometimes when I talk about this program and I encourage people to participate, we don't have a sense of ownership that way. If there's a better way to do it and it's at the village or the town level, we'll do it that way.
I was very impressed with the number of fire districts that you're servicing in your area. Did I hear that number correctly?
About half of our fire districts, and the issue there really is air packs. We did a bid for air packs, and then we discovered that everybody else needed air packs too. So one of the efficiencies is everybody didn't have to learn how to bid air packs. We bid it once. We knew what the rules were from federal government, from the state. We included it all. And I'll be honest, when I changed the bid the second time, I changed the municipality name and the quantity, and I republished it. Like there's a learning curve that happens here where the first time this is very, very difficult, right? It's difficult to get your head around what everybody does and what the challenges are. But the value in that is either the combined volume, or even if you needed different air packs for different fire departments, you have the bid written already. You can just change the technical specification out and re-put it out. So there's some real efficiencies for that. The fire departments are not doing everything with us. They're doing some select commodities with us. On the bids that we do individually for municipalities. So your garbage pickup is different than the next town's over. You decide who that vendor is going to be. The only place where we're deciding the vendor is when we've consolidated the volume and it's governed by who the low bidder is anyway.
That's a significant savings in salt that she just in salt alone. I mean,
here's the thing. I am very close to a salt mine. I don't want to give the impression that every municipality will have the same success with the same things. I would be lying to you if I told you that I did not hold that contract until 10 days after the consolidation happened. I waited to solicit it until it happened because I knew that we had already talked to the vendors and we knew that there was value that they saw in having one contract instead of 42 or however many it was that we were maintaining. I cannot tell you at all whether that's going to be a successful solution for you or not. And, you know, when I started, I was given the advantage of having some very, very well-read buyers who understood the market, who saw that opportunity. So that's experience we'd like to share with you guys, but I don't want to misrepresent the fact that there's $1.5 million on the table for you 10 days into the program. But thank you for noticing how big the number is.
No, it was just striking.
Right. The only problem is I sold the program knowing that I was going to do that, and then the year I sold it didn't snow.
Salt went out.
I didn't buy any. Manage your expectations.
Any other questions?
Yes, right.
Jeff?
Kind of a practical question. If the municipality, or if you order toilet paper, does everybody have to go to one central place to get all, or do you have it shipped to each locale?
If we do this correctly, you never know I'm there. We put the bid out. It's drop shipped directly to you. It's a 1 or 2 day delivery. Shipping is already included in the price. You called the vendor. You told him how many rolls of toilet paper you wanted, and it showed up the next day. Please don't take this the wrong way, but I don't care how many rolls of toilet paper each town or village is buying on a day-over-day basis. The vendor reports it to me once a month or once a quarter, and I just calculate the volume savings on it. Whether your decision is to buy all of your toilet paper at once for the year or to buy it by the roll, as the need comes up, that all right, it's an argument by the extreme, but that's sort of that's not our job. Our job is not to tell you how to manage it or how much storage room you have or any of those things.
You could do quite a stand-up routine with this particular.
I was specifically told to try to play this a little straight.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you once again for joining us here this morning on the.
Sure, and I know you have other business on the agenda. If it's okay, we'll stay to the end, and if anybody has questions, we'll
That's fine, and if you need to leave, just
make a scene on the way out.
just
No, got it. Thank you.
help yourself.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you. All right, Julie.
Okay. Most of you know who I am. Everybody probably knows who I am, but Sean alluded to having trust and faith in this process. So I just wanted to let everybody know, because I might not know my background. I will be hitting 20 years with the county this year. 8 of that was with Paul in the county attorney's office. The last 12 has been in purchasing. So I have a pretty good understanding of the county in general, definitely with purchasing. What we're looking at is phasing this in, as Paul said, starting with commodities. And Sean alluded to the piggybacking model. That's basically what we're doing now for our commodities. As it is, we do the bid, we extend those bids to the towns. But as he said, if you get those volumes up front, we're going to see some more savings. So the list that I handed out, it was at the back of the packet, basically shows what we're doing now. It doesn't include everything, but those are the things that we currently do. Most of those items are extended to the towns. Then we would work on, moving to the public works project, if you were interested in that, and then at some point the professional services. But the commodity would be, where we're going to see the most savings at this point, I believe. Obviously, I have a staff of 2.5 people, so realistic expectations would definitely come into play. And we could look at staffing, at some point, and how we're going to roll that out. There's anything else here. Sean talked about Article 78. Just wanted to mention we've never had one brought against us in the 12 years I've been in purchasing, so that's a good thing. And I think that pretty much covers. We haven't really dug into this yet. I think we wanted to get a feel for where everybody, how the supervisors felt. So once we get a clear direction, then obviously we'll start working on these a lot more.
Yeah, the one of the more involved bids, though, that involved all the municipalities were the transfer stations.
Which is
disposal.
coming up again this year.
That's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
And so we extended that for one additional year.
This is the last extension.
This is the last
Yeah.
extension, so that's going to be coming up here as well shortly, and we need to be
Summer.
and we're going to need to be timely with that as well. But there's a cooperative arrangement, if you will, or a cooperative bidding, I guess is the way to say it, that is immediately coming up on deck. So some of this, to some degree, is presently being done.
Right. And I mean, we do a lot of our commodity bids in the fall of each year, so a lot of those are done already. But if we got into this and any of our commodity bids for our highway materials, whatever, we would obviously be working with the towns to get your volumes, beef up the specs, and include things that maybe not the county doesn't buy, but the town would like added to the bids. So we'll have to have great communication between us, our office, and the towns, the city, whoever opts in, and go from there.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, what I'm proposing at this point, with the towns that are interested and any districts that may be interested, we would not be moving to look at school districts at this point, but just the fire, water, sewer districts types and town, village, city. But our thought was this list, and this is why Julie handed it out today. If you look at the commodities that are listed there, what we'd like to do is to see if there's municipalities that would find or that are already ordering things that are on these commodities that would be willing to join with the county. And what we would do is follow the model that Sean suggested, which was to get all of that in our bid, and so we would bid it for everybody and have that quantity going out to the vendors with the hope of being able to secure some savings. And certainly, I think, is salt on there? It should be, hopefully. We'll certainly do the salt bid. We're going to hold you to that, Sean. But we're hoping that if we have this as a starting list, and then what we would also look from the municipalities is there any other item that's not on this list that you think logically should be something that we as a county should be bidding out for everyone? If you're interested in that, and if the towns can all find something on this list, or like I say, have something you want added to it, I think that this will give us the initial efficiency plan that we need to submit on behalf of everybody. It'll also give us the hook that we need to get the towns as part of the overall efficiency plans. So the other piece of this is that we don't have much time, unfortunately. So we'll need some feedback from the municipalities pretty quick, and my office will be following up on that, which, Mr. Chairman, maybe I can take a moment, too, just to lead into the next points on this. There is, right now, 2 surveys running around to the towns. One survey was it provided to you in either an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF, where I'm asking for any types of shared services or efficiencies you're already doing since 2012, and what the cost savings have been in connection with those. And the reason I'm asking for that, and this is why I handed out this other sheet. If it looks familiar, it's from that book we had that I handed out at one of our earlier sessions. But you'll see handwritten at the very top says countywide, so you'll know you're on the right sheet. There's an example box on this sheet, and you'll see that they list like different things. Like if you go down to, say, the third box, says Town A and Town C continue to share tax collection services. Town B implements an efficiency locked box payment system. Town A and Village A do something. So what I want to do for Warren County when we submit to the state is the same type of thing. To be able to, so that's why I'm asking for that survey from you on that piece, is because in Warren County, for instance, if we're able to successfully sell Westmount, we're going to generate enough savings to cover the entire amount that is needed for the 1% for everybody added in together. However, in conversations with NISAC folks, it's clear to me that the state's not going to buy that. They're not going to say, okay, Thurman and Stony Creek and City Glens Falls, you're all set because Warren County is selling the nursing homes. They're going to say, no. We want to see something from these individual towns. And the beauty of it is, though, is that you can either show it, your involvement, by these types of examples that are on this sheet, or, as I mentioned earlier, we can show it by bringing you into the purchasing initiative in that fashion. So what I'd like to do is get as many people into the purchasing initiative as possible, and then get as many of these different examples as possible. If you don't have any, that's fine, but if you at least belong to the purchasing initiative, we'll list that. And then that'll become what we submit to the state along with the Westmount sale, et cetera. So we'll have all of these items listed, and then I feel comfortable that should be accepted by the Division of Budget. Now, one of the things that's important as you prepare those sheets, though, is remember that you, either as town supervisor or your chief fiscal officer, but I think most towns, I think that is who it is. The city may be different. But you're going to have to sign off that you're comfortable that those savings expectations are reasonable. And obviously, we'll be working with Julie, et cetera, to make, to build the comfort level on the purchasing. But on the items that you're providing, if we don't know anything about it, the county will be really relying on you in terms of making sure that those numbers are, adequate or accurate, if you will. So But the other piece of it that that I have out there too is a survey that was sent out yesterday on animal control and dog control. And here again, if we could get those back from you, say within another week or two, that would be very helpful, so that I know what municipalities may be involved in that. And in fact, what I'd like to do is, if it's acceptable to the committee, is in 2 weeks have a discussion and maybe a presentation on animal control and dog control for the committee, much like we just did with purchasing, so that we can see if there's any traction there in terms of what is the possibilities of how we're going to do a consolidated effort there and what the savings might be. And that would be, of course, I think a lot of you are already familiar with Jim Fitzgerald, but I would anticipate inviting, certainly him in as part of that discussion.
Paul, if you could, this first column of commodities, if you could put this out like you did the animal control to all of the potential participants and ask them to add or delete, so to speak, to the list, to try to get as complete a list. Like on salt, for example, a number of municipalities are using the Clear Lane right now. So we would need to have regular salt as a commodity, but we would also need to know,
Sure.
what we might be able to achieve on something like Clear Lane. That would be important for the village and for Lake George and for Bolton, and perhaps even I know Hague's looking at building a new salt building to try to consider using that as well. So, but if we could provide this, and then each supervisor can get this in the hands of the person that primarily handles this in the municipality, and we can go through our purchasing records and see.
Yeah, that would actually be excellent. And then at that same time, we could get what Sean had referred to as a baseline. So to the extent that you know what you're spending on these items, if I could get that as well from you, and then we'll have our own spend here at the county, that'll give us a baseline for starting with these items, and then also we could project ahead from there. So I can certainly do that, Mr. Chairman, and I'll try to put it out in a very easy to use. I don't know. Do people like the Excel spreadsheets, or do you prefer a different? Either one. Maybe I'll put it out both ways again, so that way you can use it whatever way you feel most comfortable with, and we'll try to set it up as easy as possible, so you can just kind of fill in the blanks.
Good, good. Rachel, is that?
I could certainly forward them to you, yes. Absolutely. Yes, I did not send them to any at-large supervisor, because they were directed specifically to the individual towns, because I figured you as, a at-large supervisor would not have that information. We were asking for details in terms of, do you have a dog control officer? Is it full-time, part-time? What's the salary? What's the benefits? What's the contract cost? So I simply issued it to the municipalities directly as the source for that information. We were going to bring that back to the full committee and share that with everybody, but no, but I certainly can send it out to you. Absolutely. Certainly.
Okay.
And I think, Jim?
Yeah, the city of Glens Falls basically is the controller of all the sewer system for Queensbury and Glens Falls. So it's sort of, the purchasing for that is sort of consolidated by the simple fact that we do it. But we could get much greater purchasing power if we went and joined with, say, would Onondaga want to join with us, or could we join with you in buying chemicals, or work on some idea where we would get I don't know if the state contract would already cover that, or if it would be better, maybe advantageous for us to work together.
If there's value we can add, we're happy to answer any questions Julie has, and if there's a place we can be successful together, great.
I mean, I don't know if there's a legal problem with that or not, or, two different counties, but it just seems to me it would make, there's no more, we can't get a consolidate anymore because we're already there, pretty much.
Well, you picked her up with
Well, I know, I thought of that, but most of you guys are,
You got
It-
Warrensburg, Bolton, and Lake George Village, then you skip to, that ain't,
before I even asked the question, I thought of you guys, but rather than going that route, I was just gonna, my basic question though is, can we join together in doing it?
I am a jack of all trades and master of none, so before, if that's a question that comes from your organization, I would want to talk to my water chemical experts and that sort of thing, just to make sure that there were some similarities and some overlap, but we'll participate in any of those conversations that you guys ask us.
And we would, of course, try to include the town of Lake George in our efforts, and,
that would be the village.
I think,
or the village,
and
and
another,
Warrensburg.
Jim, another area of potential opportunity is that, in terms of waste disposal, you have certain, infrastructure and certain capacities and abilities in the city that perhaps could lend itself to the towns and be a revenue source to the city.
Right,
You have certain you have lab capabilities in the
We do.
city. Those would be some areas that I think that long-term, not necessarily for our initial plan, but for the long-term plan, those are the areas that I think we really need to focus on. Perhaps we could have some sort of unified disposal arrangement
Right.
that would be
Well-
beneficial to the towns, but also beneficial to...
I thought of that, but when I looked at the population that we're including, it's not nearly as great as including the city of Syracuse, for example, in terms of the volume that you have. So if we did what you're talking about, but also we could get a real bang for the buck if we could somehow, I mean, as long as you're here, take the opportunity to pursue that as well. I think, I don't know if it would benefit you as much as us, but it would certainly be worth exploring.
My answer is not no.
Okay.
I'm operating in a vacuum, so that's the best I can do right now. But I certainly, we have made a commitment to support your efforts in any way we can.
Okay. If we could, Joan, if we could send a letter to the county executive expressing our appreciation for the presentation here today and for the offer of assistance, I think that would be in line from the chairman, Mr. Garrity, to... Thank you. Anything else for today?
The only other thing I wanted to mention, Mr. Chairman, was on the districts, your water, sewer districts and fire protection districts. In speaking with Representatives NISAC again, I was informed that we should be looking to try to achieve savings with them. I was told that, and you as town supervisors probably know this better than I do at this point, but that when you do your 2% cap calculations, you are including all of your districts and town, and when you calculate that out. Pardon? Or the fire districts are separate? Okay. Well, it depends on the fire district, actually. Right. The two different types of districts.
It would include the lighting district.
Right. Okay, so depending upon how you calculate those out, though, and then if there is a tax in those areas, I was told that we do want to try to pick those up to get some savings for you and include, them in this process, so that if, for instance, your town had a zero tax, and yet you had a district, either a fire district or another district in your town that does have a tax, then we're going to want to save that 1% off that tax. So we definitely would like to try to bring those into this too, just so that you are aware of that, because your district folks, as I understand it, could be entitled to a rebate. So we want to make sure we grab those. And other than that, Mr. Chairman, I think that the next stage is really to gather more information, and I would like to recommend that the committee get back together within 2 weeks.
Absolutely. There being no business, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Wood, Mr. Thomas, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're adjourned.